Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is the second day of FICCI and NIDM joint online training program on fire safety. And as most of you attended the first day yesterday, and we covered the overall concept of fire safety in India, in addition to the lead lecture given by Dr. Anil Gupta and some other introductory addresses we had yesterday during the inaugural. So now this is the second day, and today we are going to cover, rather we are going to deep dive into some of the core issues related to fire safety, which comprises of National Building Code, fire safety audits, rules, regulations, and assessments. So this is going to be very interesting session today. Like yesterday, I once again request all of you to ensure that you are present throughout the 3 days of the training program, and you have to ensure 80% of attendance to get the certificate at the end of the program. Uh, to start with, we have the first speaker. We have with us Mr. Sandeep Goel, who is a well-known expert in this area. I think people who have joined as attendees today and who work in the fire safety domain must be knowing Mr. Sandeep Goel ji. But just to start with, I would like to briefly introduce him. Mr. Sandeep Goel is director, Prion Consultants, and he is a building service consulting. It's a building service consulting, and he has over 25 years of experience in this domain. Mr. Goel also contributes significantly in various disciplines of building service design and codes, and has collaboratively worked towards the revision of National Building Code of India. I mean, most of us are aware of the National Building Code. It was a huge, revolution. So, Mr. Sandeep Goel was involved, throughout the journey of National Building Code from 2005 version to 2016 edition. He also contributed and led in design services of HVAC, plumbing services, electrical services, fire, life safety systems, and sustainability related services. He is a visiting faculty at School of Planning and Architecture in New Delhi, and has over 15 years of contribution towards imparting lectures to young students of master degree program in building engineering services. I would like to welcome Mr. Over to you now.
Thank you, Gauravji. I hope I'm audible, Gauravji.
Yes, very clear.
Yes. Thank you so much. And I deeply appreciate and convey my sincere gratitude to FICCI to have this opportunity to invite me. It's been a pleasure to be over here. I do appreciate that the lecture we'll talk about today in part and whole has been probably discussed earlier with my colleagues. But you see, the topic is so interesting, and I would say it requires all of us to contribute so well that we have still a lot to do in the improvisation of the code. So my opportunity would also be to seek any of your questions, any of your inputs. As part of the code committee, we are always very keen, and we request all the fellow colleagues to come up with their inputs in the improvisation of the codes backed up with some technical aspects. Working in committee, of course, requires us to demonstrate the correctness which has to be brought into the code. It does not really work on mujhe lagta hai wale concept se, that I would like to make a little bit more brighter staircase. I would like to make a more compartment like this. Everything has to be scientifically, engineeredly demonstrated to the senior colleagues of the committee for making the changes. So I'm very pleased that most of these changes have happened with a lot of technical inputs coming from all the committee members. And all of you who are attending here are equally respectful to us, because you could actually be bringing the change in betterment of the code. From that aspect, Gauravji, I would start off with my technical presentation here.
Sure, please go ahead.
I hope the screen is visible.
It is coming. Yes, yeah, we can see the screen now.
Okay. So thank you so much. And I think the presentation has been talked about in earlier conferences and seminars. And I would like to bring the same passion of explaining it once again. So colleagues who would have probably heard this, they're welcome to put their questions as well. So the whole idea which runs about in the National Building Code of India is that, the book which we are very passionate about, this comes from our country. And I can tell you one thing for sure, that globally, this has been a big reference document for other municipalities and authorities to look at what is happening in India. So since we work a lot on the global platform, I do recognize that the changes which we have made have become significantly important for other global peoples to understand. So the code, of course, was released in 1970, moved to 83. From 83, we went to 87, then in 97, then 2005, and finally 2016, which actually released on the 15th March 2017. And now this has got 13 parts, and then they have got alag sections. And total, they have got 13 chapters, 33 chapters. The very important thing about the NBC, which has happened, is that we have got a huge, documentation with respect to figures. We were earlier with 6 figures, and today we are on 16 figures and diagrams in the new revision. We had a 3-plate terminology, and we have now moved to a 6-plate terminology. When I started working towards, discussion with colleagues, we realized, that the terminology is such an important part in a fire engineering. People who are sitting in India, I would recognize that sometimes, you used to say, architect colleagues used to say fire corridor, fire path, fire route. Now, if we start using these kind of terms, they are not globally recognized. So we have to start using a terminology which is more correct with respect to the global way we talk. And that's what the code looked at in improvising the terminology. Terminology is English. If you do not know the right terms to be used in a conversation, your system is not going to work. All of us know software to some extent. If you do not use the right syntax in making of a software, the computer does not give you the right outputs. Similarly, engineers to architects to users to system integrators have to use the right terminology. We also realized that the India is a moving country, and we are now having atriums, we have commercial kitchens, we have got car parking facilities, we have got metros. So now it is time that these kind of important occupancies in the building should come up with their own requirements highlighted. So the code committee actually intended to include more annexures, what you see on the screen. So if you are doing a building which is having an atrium, it gives you a focused requirement for atrium. If you are doing a commercial, if you are doing a hotel, what are the safeties for the kitchen in the hotel have been highlighted here. So there are annexures which have got involved into the National Building Code of India. The whole objective was, and I'm not going to repeat whatever written is on the screen, because you can, by the time I finish my conversation, you will be able to read this. The whole idea was that the code has to be adaptive. It should not have controversies and anomalies. The page 3 and the page 6 should read hand in hand. And that's where I think more transparency is required. We need more clarity with respect to the requirements of the clauses should be well woven into itself. It should not be looking into contradicting with each other, which adds confusion to the customer, to the end user, to the builder, to the architect. So some of the objectives which the code committee planned was that we should have minimum interpretational related issues. We should have more sketches so that it can give you better clarity. One of the important things we realized in fire and life safety code in the country, that you may do one of the best designs, but if your electrical resilience and distribution is not very effective, what is the point of providing a pressurization fan when the function of that fan at the 11th hour is going to compromise and the electrical distribution network fails? So you really can't look at the code in isolation only towards meeting the fire safety without looking into the backend system which has to complement it. Gauravji, what time should I stop? Can you just tell me the timeline so that I keep my watch?
Yeah, sure. So as per agenda, you have to finish by by 2:40. So from
Okay.
2:40 we can take some questions.
Sure. Thank you, Gauravji. So this brings a better clarity towards the speed we have to talk about. So now you see the code is very clear with its objective. We have talked about fire prevention, and in the fire prevention, the code looks at 3 basic fundamentals. Fire prevention means you should do a system with which, to begin with, the fire should not occur in the building. That means you should do the right electrical design. You should use the right materials in the project. You should use the right type of structural rating into the project, so that by and large, the fire itself is prevented, is not happening in the building. Now, these are various things with which you can prevent the fire to happen in the building. So if you are not storing combustible material, you are using the right type of gas distribution network, you are using the right type of interior finishes, all those things will let the fire not happen. An efficient electrical distribution system, all of us knows, is one of the biggest culprits in the design where the fire occurs because of electrical poor designs. But if you are doing a good electrical design, your fire will not occur. Now, God forbid, the fire occurs. The next thing to look at is life safety. We should not lose human life. People life is valuable. We all realize, specifically, COVID has made us realize how valuable one life is and what kind of grief it gets to the family if we lose a person in this kind of a calamity. So life safety is very important. I would say most of us take it for granted that we are safe in the building and we don't care, but life safety is one of the most important things. And in the blueprint of the design, if the life safety is not being handled carefully, it will affect the functions of the building. Once the life safety matter has been addressed, we get into fire prevention. Property safety, asset safety is equally important. Of course, it is lesser important in comparison to the loss of life. But yes, we all realize that God forbid if there is a data center, which I was reading very recently was burnt out in Europe, you could imagine it could also create a lot of problems financially and socially to the people, because losing of asset is also a loss in our life, which creates a lot of void. So fire prevention wise, whether you talk about firefighting or sprinkler system, that also has to be designed appropriately, correctly maintained and installed so that you are able to prevent the spread of fire within the building. And of course, you have got different types of buildings, you have got different types of occupancies, residential occupancies, business occupancies, educational occupancies, assembly occupancies, industrial occupancies, storage occupancies. All these occupancies have their own specific requirements, and we need to cater to those requirements is what the code requires for. Now, having said that, the NBC also gives a very good importance to audits and drills. If you do not do the audits and drills correctly, it's like you are not being careful about your own health. And if you do not do a blood sugar check or you do not keep a tag of your heart condition, you can be into a problem. So similarly, the NBC has required specific requirements for audits, and of course, drills and evacuation, additional requirements for high rise. These are some of the best things which have got into NBC. So as a stakeholder, I think it's our duty to also look at the guidelines for evacuation and keep practicing them in our day-to-day activities. But what is the real picture? When I do workshop with my colleagues, my clients, my architects, this is the real picture. And this is where the problem starts. Everybody looks at the elephant with its own understanding. And the whole problem is that we are not able to come to resolving the problems, but we look at silos. And I will give you a very small example to demonstrate how we look at in silos without coming to the common ground of providing the safety to the building. So when you're in an aircraft, from the pilot to the air hostess to the people who are there on the ground, all of them are responsible for the safety of the aircraft, not just the pilot. So you don't just say that the architect is the one who's going to take the lead. I think everybody contributes in their own significant ways to make the building safe. So having said that, the aspects comes over here as lecture with respect to architectural design. We talk about life safety aspects, which are very important. I would say life safety is most important, and if the architectural design itself is not correctly placed and you have a problem in the blueprint, you may do whatever steps, but the building systems are compromised. The other thing when it comes to is MEP, which I also have certain understanding about. We talk about smoke mitigation, we talk about fire alarm, we talk about PA system, fire protection, elevators, electrical resilience. And I feel, Gauravji, one of the most important thing which we do not give a lot of importance in our country is PA system. And as a consultant, I would like to always tell my colleagues and my clients that you may give a lot of importance to many other things, but through this opportunity of FICCI, I would like to convey that we should be very passionate about public address system. If your public address system in a project is very modern and very well maintained, you can actually control a lot of problems by doing the right evacuation messaging. You see, at the time of the problem, effective message is able to direct you to do the things which you should do. If you do not give the right directives, we will have stampede, we will have loss of life, because in panic situation, those all problems do happen. So I think as a passionate stakeholder, a lot of us talk about smoke mitigation. You know, a lot of my colleagues always talk about smoke is the biggest killer. I think, to my understanding, a wrong announcement or an incorrect announcement or not making the announcement is a bigger killer than the smoke itself. Because if you are able to provide the right type of announcements, you are able to control the human movement into the building. Now, once you are able to understand the life safety aspects, then there are active system aspects. So life, as far as active systems in the code is concerned, is much more easier. It's a prescriptive requirement. Go to table number 7, open their type of occupancy, check the height of the building. There are different types of installations, extinguishers, hydrants, sprinklers, the type of fire alarm system you have to provide. All of that put together, you can actually find out the active systems which have to be provided in the building, which also the National Building Code very clearly highlights. Of course, we do talk about the electrical safety. One of the other topics which I feel we should be very passionate about is emergency lighting and exit lighting. We take these things for granted that emergency lighting or exit lighting की कोई value नहीं है building में. But believe me, when you are in a building and there is complete dark because of fire which might happen in the building, the only saving grace in an auditorium what you see is that exit light on top of the door. And you know, that's the most valuable thing to see in that auditorium. Similarly, in any facility, if your exit lighting is not very correctly placed, you can believe me that at that kind of time, the only safety which you can get through is by knowing the passage which will tell you where to exit from. So these are some of the things. Now, one of the other things which we talk about, that knowingly, unknowingly, we do mistakes of these sorts. We think the refuge areas are to be then provided with air conditioners which are stocked up into the balcony areas. They'd leave no space for the people to be there. We have got situations like this, Gauravji, where we are using these kind of spaces to stack up our air conditioners. We have got an example, which is a building in Delhi, where electrical panels are not allowed in the staircases. And here is an example to tell you that you are ignoring these things. And within the mid landing of the project, you have got a door and you have got a glass door inside which there are electrical panels. Now, God forbid, if there is a fire in that electrical panel, the fire is going to come into that staircase and this staircase will no more be further usable. I'll give you certain examples of what I have learned. You see the sprinkler, it's not even provided with the right kind of, right kind of support. When the water will come, it's going to put water all around. It's not going to spray the water on the fire. You see this Upahar tragedy which has happened. In this Upahar tragedy, the engineers were told you have to pressurize the staircase. Now, when you have to do the pressurization of staircase, what do? Provide a fan. So the engineers, in their wisdom, they provided the fan in the opposite direction. So they just knew that you have to provide a FAN fan. So you provide a fan in the mid landing of the staircase, Gauravji. It led to the smoke from the auditorium to be sucked into the staircase. So it is, in fact, a reverse damage of what you should have done. So these are some of the things. Now, another classic example, if you have a fire door and if you keep a door stopper, the fire door has no meaning because the fire from that space is going to enter into the staircase. We realize these problems. So the National Building Code, what you see the clause at the bottom, introduced a warning that in case you have a fire door, please do not keep it on door hold open. It has to be closed. Door stopper is not allowed because we realize that people did innovative things by providing a door stopper on a fire door. So the whole meaning of providing a fire door has been foregone. So if you look at the exit, an exit in engineering term is a staircase. So the architect has to provide the right numbers of exits, their width and their locations. The structural engineer has to provide the right type of structural integrity to that staircase for people to use it for 2 hours. The ID consultant, interior designer, uses the right types of materials for those kind of materials which are used for the construction of the staircase, inside the staircase. The mechanical engineer pressurizes the staircase to make sure that the smoke does not enter into the staircase. The electrical engineer provides the light inside the staircase so that you don't topple, you don't fall down. And of course, the firefighting engineer provides the sprinkler and he seals all these spaces for no smoke to enter. So if you ask me, all these stakeholders are contributing together in the safety of the staircase. Can we have one person whom you say, I don't need you on the project, I can manage without you? It is like working together for the success of the project. So I think an electrical engineer is as important as a structural engineer, is as important as an architect. Because everybody, when we'll give their contribution, we will meet our objectives. What is the problem with the staircase? This staircase has a big problem. You have done everything, but this door is not a fire door. It's a normal door. It's just a door which is being provided. It also has a door stopper, and it also is, although having a door closure, but again, the whole objective is fallen because you have had the staircase door open. So what happens in this case? If you have a staircase which is open, it violates the segregation. It helps the smoke to travel from one floor to the other floor because it is not an enclosed staircase. So I'll take you to the fundamentals of how you talk about safety in fire safety as far as National Building Code is concerned. So if you look at the National Building Code of India, we call something which is known as exit access. What is exit access? I'll tell you very simply. You are in a building. You are working in your office. You are working on a computer. You are inside a restaurant. You are eating food. You are inside imaginably a school where you are studying. You are in a space where everybody is collaborating, working together. But what happens is when there is a whistle, when you have to move out of the building during the fire drill, what do? From the space where you are working on the computer in your office, you start walking to what we call it exit. And what is an exit? The exit is this red box. It actually provides you the complete mechanism to come out of the building from the 14th floor to the ground floor. So what I mean to say is that I always narrate that an exit protects you like your mother and brings you from the space of concern to the ground floor, protecting you from all eventualities of exposure to fire. As per international codes, if you're in a building on a 18th floor, when will you be safe? The answer to that question is when you are inside the staircase. Very simple. If you are able to go from your space in your office where you're working on a computer and you are able to walk across and enter into the staircase, you are in a safe zone. As long as that staircase is not open and that staircase is closed. So what happens? You leave the evil behind. You get into the staircase, the door closes and the evil is behind you. The monster is behind, but you are into that safe zone from where you are able to come down to the ground. And that's why we should learn to respect exit. If you put LPG pipelines, you put mattresses, you go and smoke into the staircases and you leave over there cigarette butts, those staircases will not help you at that juncture when you need them. They will become actually incapable to bring you to the ground. So in that spirit, this is the staircase. As long as you are able to reach the staircase from your place where you are in the safe zone. So having said that, the National Building Code further described that if you have got 10 staircases in your building, out of 10 staircases, 5 staircases should go directly outside or they should use a passage to go outside. Today, you go to many buildings, when you come down on the ground, you land into the lobby. So the code realizes that if you have got 10 staircases and all of them bring you to the lobby. Now, Gauravji, I'll ask you, God forbid there is a fire in the lobby. Where will you go? You are already into a space which is on fire. So let's imagine that you have got staircases, what you see on the diagram, are able to go out. In case there is a fire in the lobby, the PA system announces the people for them to use the staircases by numbers. Staircase number 3, 4, and 6 to be used to please go out. That time you prohibit or you discourage the people to use those staircases, which if they come to lobby, they will have eventuality of people being risk being exposed to them. So as I said to you, if you name your staircases Saraswati, Vandana, and you told them Varanasi, and you are able to say, please use right now these staircases for exits, because the staircase which you bring down to the ground are having risk exposure, you are able to make a more effective PA communication. So that's how the whole thing has to work, not just on blueprint, but in practice. So the National Building Code tells you, Mr. Gaurav, if you are an architect and you are doing 10 staircases, please bring 5 staircases outside directly. So that if there is a problem, I'm able to bring those people into those 5 staircases so as to avoid the risk of exposure to them. The science and the engineering of doing the measurements. People come to us, architects come to us and say, Mr. Goel, I would like to do a travel distance the way it has been shown on a diagonal path. I said, sorry, sir, in the real life, that's not how you're going to walk. In the real life, you will go as per path number A because you'll have furniture. He said, but I don't have the furniture. I said, you may not have the furniture, but are you not truthful to your design? Can you not do a measurement like this for me? If you measure like this for me, it means that I have certain respect in my travel distance measurement. I'm not doing a random check. I remember a lot of colleagues on the panel over here would remember most of us used to draw circles for travel distance. Absolutely incorrect. Then we started moving towards diagonal approach. Not a little bit more better, but the most correct approach would be when you do 90 degrees, connections as we see there. Now this is on exits, but I would like to introduce something very important for the code over here, Gauravji, fire tower. It will be very interesting to talk for, I've got about 10 minutes left, something on the fire tower. Fire tower is what you see as per definition. If architects were to make, as per the old National Building Code, they will have to reproduce this picture 300 times. That means all the buildings should have this kind of a picture. Now, this is not possible to do. So what we realized, that we are giving something which is impractical. And we publish that in the code. We give to Mr. Gaurav, who's an architect, and we tell them, please abide by the code. And Mr. Gaurav says, your code is so impractical that I can't do it. And then Mr. Gaurav does not do it. Then what happens? God forbid, there is a fire in the building which Mr. Gaurav has designed. That day, the whole bureaucracy is after Mr. Gaurav that you did not abide by the code. Now, Mr. Gaurav says, sir, there are other 20 buildings which do not abide by this code. They say, I don't care. It's like the traffic light. You jump the red light, you are channeled. Other 5 people are jumping. They say, forget about them. You are under the bar because you have not taken care of the safety at your end. So we realize those things. We changed the National Building Code, realizing that a fire tower, external limitation of the people to go the staircase and up is also not possible. So we realized globally, the fire is fought from inside the building. It is never fought from outside, putting like a Superman. You are moving around the building, hurricaning like a Spider-Man and trying to douse the fire. You have to be in the core of the building to fight the fire. So we introduced a concept known as fire tower. What does a fire tower has? It's got an elevator, it's got a staircase, and it's got a lobby. So in today's lecture, Gauravji, I think a very meaningful approach, which the people could probably carry the message in their design, is this. If you are able to, and I'll explain you how we are passionate about a fire tower. Very easy to understand. You have got a staircase, you've got an elevator, and you've got a lobby. Now you've got these 3 things together. They work together, how beautifully they work. There's a lot of text here, but I will explain this to you. Now let's imagine a scenario where my client would have done this design. They would have told me, Mr. Goel, here is your lift and here's your staircase. Can you give me a signature? And I said, if I do this, what am I doing? In this scenario, the fire hose cabinet is what you can see, Gauravji, I put up with a red arrow. The fireman enters into the space which is on fire and he tries to take the fire hose to fight the fire. It is like me telling you that you go inside a COVID ward and then you wear your PP kit. By the time your exposure is there, you are already in a big risk zone. So tell me, is this design correct? The fire hose cabinet is outside. The fireman is inside the staircase. He enters into the space, takes the hose and starts fighting fire. Not possible. So we changed it. What we did this, Gauravji. We provided the staircase, the elevator, and the hose cabinet together at one location, and we provided the space, the yellow zone, from where you can take the hose cabinet and enter into the space where there is fire. So the yellow zone is your resting zone, is your staging zone. That's the zone where you stage yourself. Once you have staged yourself, you enter into the enemy zone with your PP kit. So that means outside the COVID ward, there is a vestibule where you change to the PP kit and then enter into the COVID ward. You don't enter into the COVID ward and then start wearing your kit. In the similar way, we created a staging area. So once you've done the staging area, what happens is the elevators are aside. These elevators, which you see on the diagram, are used by the firemen to go up and down. Now, if you are a fireman, Gauravji, and you have to go on 15th floor and you run out of your breathing gas, do you tell your other colleague to go and fetch the apparatus for you from the ground floor? He'll not do. What do? You tell the control command and you say, my name is Gaurav and I need a breathing apparatus. Please provide me. How do they provide you? By elevator. So the elevator brings you on the 14th floor, your breathing apparatus like that. So once you get your breathing apparatus, you come into the staging area, take your breathing apparatus and go back into the area to fight fire. So it supplements you your requirements. Had you been into a scenario like this, you are already in a burning space. How can you stage yourself? When you do what we call as terrorist attack, we do a cover. So where is the cover provided over here? So that cover was introduced in this space. And what has happened? This is the staging area. This is where you stage yourself before you enter into the enemy zone. And that's what the fire tower did. So we took the hydrant from here and we entered into the fire space from a staging area. That's what we picked up from the British code and introduced. And today, the American code is looking at it very seriously, although the Singapore code also has something which we have already prescribed in our code. So this becomes your staging area. And then to add to it, we have connected the refuge area. So I ask you one small question, Gauravji, maybe you're not able to answer me today. If you are working in a multinational company and you are on 18th floor, I want to ask my friends and colleagues here, you are on 18th floor in a multinational company, either in Bombay, Gurgaon or Delhi or Noida, and you are told that you have a colleague who is handicapped, who is on a wheelchair. What is the directions which you have been given in case of fire? What do you do with that colleague who's on the wheelchair? We don't have answers for this today, but we have got a refuge area. So the code actually told Mr. Gaurav that if you have a colleague who's in a wheelchair, please bring him to the refuge area and you leave the building, because I don't want you to be with him. But the refuge area becomes a safe zone for a pregnant lady, for an old man, for a man on the wheelchair, who will be then assisted by the firemen to be brought down to the ground by the same thing what I called you the elevator, Gauravji. So in this picture, what you see, the red zone is actually the green zone where you can park yourself. And once you're in that zone, let the rest of the floor burn, because you are being prevented by compartmentation strategy. And in the compartmentation strategy, you rest yourself because you are out of the evils of fire. And somebody will come and take your wheelchair into the elevator, which I just showed you, to bring you down to the ground. That's what the fundamental of a fire tower and a refuge floor is working together as. They go hand in gloves. So then again, I'm now coming to 5 minutes of my presentation further, Gauravji, keeping the timelines. The National Building Code also earlier told you to give what we call it as a tagging. Today, you take pictures from your camera. Half the time, my mobile phone, I'm able to see when I was in Mumbai, what are my pictures? When I was in Chennai, what are my pictures? My pictures have got geotagging. Today, what is your geotagging, Gauravji? If you are in a building and you, God forbid, are not able to inhale properly, and you are in a staircase, how do you tell the fire control command where you are? So we introduced a concept of tagging. You say to the fire control command, my name is Gaurav, block A, staircase number 3, floor number 5. I'm not able to inhale. Please provide me backup safety. And you will be rescued. Because when there is a fire, You have no clue to understand what the hell you are in, which building, which tower, which floor. So we started prescribing to provide this kind of a identification for the people to inform where they are. Compartmentation, as I told you, we are very passionate about compartmentalizing the building. So you have to have a Lakshman Rekha. God forbid there is a fire in a zone, it should not spread horizontally and devastate the entire floor. That is another fundamentals of compartmentation, which we have provided for. You also provide compartmentation by providing fire curtains and doors, which can be discussed further with the architects and planners. Structural components are very important in a building. We need to understand that a tall building can collapse if it does not have the columns of the fire rating, of correct fire rating. So the code prescribes you the fire ratings of columns, beams, and slabs, so that despite the fire, the building should not fall apart. And there should be enough time for the fight to get fighted. So structural integrity is another important to talk about. We talk about smoke mitigation. How smoke mitigation, and I'm left with about 3-4 minutes, Gauravji. Smoke mitigation is very important. How you talk about smoke mitigation, controlling the smoke, but importantly, what we did in smoke management, we provided this table. So as an architect, you tell me, Mr. Goel, I've got a lift lobby. I'll tell you what you have to do. I've got a staircase. I'll tell you what to do. I'll tell you what is your staircase, if it is with external wall or it is internal. So various permutations and combinations have been prescribed in the code, and it becomes more easier for the user to adapt what the code says. So unlike Nfpa 92, which is a lot of performance-based design, in our country, we plan to do more prescriptive design because people will be not able to get the performance-based design so easily adapted. So that's why we have looked at prescriptive design. We have also provided for schemes for auditorium smoke venting, how the smoke from the auditoriums is going to be taken away. Smoke mitigation for atriums, how atriums which can result in a lot of smoke, which can build up. That has again been picked up from international codes and prescribed, because smoke is another important topic to talk about. We have talked about the smoke mitigation from basements, because basements could be huge car parking areas which can offer a lot of fire load. So smoke has to go out from the basement, because we have to make sure that the firefighting operations are smooth. I talked about fire alarm, Gauravji, and I said fire alarm is very important. Fire alarm is like buying an expensive phone and not using its features. Today we see detectors everywhere, but if the detectors are not working correctly and not programmed correctly, all that investment is gone into no investment. So therefore, the code has itself prescribed you what is the kind of systems you have to provide for the fire alarm system. There is a matrix which tells you cause and effect. When I say cause and effect means if I punch you, you punch me back or you run away. So there is a cause and there is an effect. So the code prescribes you that if there is an alarm which happens, let us say there is an alarm which happens, the gas supply should shut off. So that's why it's known as cause and effect matrix. We have got glass facade. So the code now prescribes you to open the glass facade in case of fire, operable panels. You should not be stuck in a building where you can't even breathe the fresh air. So the operable panels have become mandatory in the code. This is the pictures which we take from internationally. They do provide panels for people to open in case of distress. The Grenfell fire, which was a case study in itself, had got problems where flammable material were there in the facade. So that's where the Grenfell fire happened, and that's where we can do another case study and talk about it, Gauravji. And we have talked about providing the sprinklers to cool the glass also in the code. So therefore, in case there is a fire which happens in the building, the glass facade may be able to blast out to cool the glass facade. And we know from our childhood days of class 7th, take a cardboard, put water inside it and put a flame beneath it. I'm sure we enjoyed all those science experiments. The cardboard will not burn because the glass is cooling the cardboard. So therefore, cooling the glass will not let the glass shatter. So I feel if you have the right operational instructions, clarity and drill, we are in a safe zone. Today, Gauravji, I tell you for sure, our understanding about operational aspects is very weak in this country. We have to work together to educate, to understand the fundamentals. A lot of times people do come to me and they say, we have been doing this for 20 years. Well, if you have been doing it for 20 years, doesn't mean that you're doing it right. It means there could be something which is wrong, and there's no harm in accepting that we have done something wrong. I tell you, we should learn to unlearn and not live with what we have learned in all these years. So probably, as I say, this is my country, my people, and my code. We have to be passionate about educating each other and keeping a very, very strong eye about making sure that we don't make any mistakes. And from there, Gauravji, I'm glad I'm 1 minute up on my time, but we can have a dialogue as you kindly permit me to take up that.
Thank you, Sandeep ji, and beautifully covered all the important things, and that is what we expect when Mr. Sandeep Goel is speaking on a topic which is very close to you. Some of the issues which you touched upon, and we or rather I as a layman can very well relate to it. Like compartment strategy is a very old strategy and also used in the Navy ships. The compartment is actually this compartmentation is a very good known strategy for that. And in case of fire also, he just showed us with some diagrams. Also, people always talks about the specifications when you talk about the installations of equipments and safety measures. But you are very correctly said that the operational requirements are something is very weakly, we do generally do not talk about the operational requirements, and that is where we are lacking actually. I hope that NBC, has all those important things covered in it right now. Although always there is a scope for improvement, as you just said, we have to learn continuously. But now I can see a few questions for you, Mr. Goel, on the panel. So
Yes,
I
sir.
just try to take a few questions.
Sure, sir.
Uh, okay, so one is very specific thing, that is there any guideline regarding the fire safety management in prisons? Is there any special guidelines for that, or it is just a
Yes, prisons are considered as institutional buildings in our kind of scenarios, and prisons do have all the kind of systems with which locking arrangements are provided. I do not have experience of the designs for the prisons, but the code definitely describes the facilities with which the specific area first has to be compartmentalized, just to make sure that the prisons are overall not all the latches are not opened in one go. It can relate to some criminal issues which might erupt. So first you have to do compartmentation, which the code prescribes very clearly. Then within the compartmentation, you have to come out with an opportunity for the inmates to get released to exits. But definitely, once they have got released to the exits, you can do a perimetric control for them not to able to go out to the public way. So there has to be a cascading, release mechanism without the final release happening to the public way.
Thank you for that. Next question is related with NBC. There are rather two questions which are related to each other. One question asked about, is there any third-party assessment system in India for NBC other than government body? And second is asking is that the training. Sorry. What are the differences between the NBC and Nfpa by installation purpose? Which is the best thing?
Sir, I'll tell you, Gauravji, my experience is we are more conservative in our codes. If you look at the travel distance, I'll give you an example. We are at 45 meters for sprinkler buildings. Nfpa goes as good as 70 meters.
Oh.
So if you really ask me, my experience is that in NBC, we do understand operational mismanagements to some extent. And there is actually no law which hangs you. So in fact, NBC, if you ask me, is more conservative, more demanding, because in Nfpa, there is iota of a mistake is not allowed. So therefore, they become a little more relaxed. And as you imagine, we are more conservative. We expect people not to be very, I'll give you a classical example. Our staircases are, if in American design, you would need 7 staircases. In Indian design, you need 10 staircases. Because we do understand as a DNA, those 10 staircases, 2 or 3 of them will have by default problems. So there is an iota of a problem which might happen in our operational strategies. And an American strategy, if you are caught smoking in the elevator, you lose your 1 year salary, or you go into the jail. In our conditions, things are more palatable and malleable. So we are more conservative, but the day we become more, I would say, authenticated in establishing what we want, we will start going towards American codes.
I agree. I agree to your opinion on this. Correct. Next, raising awareness, effective ways to create awareness in general public to check all the safety measures prior choosing the. This is regarding the residential apartment, schools and other important buildings.
Yeah, please go ahead, sir. आप क्या बोल रहे हैं?
Mr. Murli is asking what are the effective ways to create awareness to general public to be to rest assured about all the safety measures in the various buildings like school building, apartments, residential apartments, and all that. What are the best ways to aware people, making people aware?
देखिए sir, I'll tell you, Gaurav ji, my experience. I go to my friends in Indirapuram and Gurgaon. Most of the places, the yellow sprinkler is still there on the sprinkler head. So I would say, we are already pretty aware about things, but we are actually ignoring. How many times we go and park our car in the basement near a fire hydrant where, God forbid, if there is a fire, they will not be able to open the door of the hydrant because you have parked your car over there. So I feel as part of FICCI, what we can do together, we can create some good pictures only. And we can say what is so wrong in those pictures for the general public to at least start feeling embarrassed that they have not been careful about these things. So I feel general awareness is by and large with us, but I think a more detailed rather than a lecture like this, even if you do 20 pictures to tell people that this is where you are into a risk zone. I'll ask one small question, Gauravji, and after that, you can say how the session can close, and you can take rest of the questions. How many of us are aware, in case of fire, if you are in a residential building on 20th floor and your building is 25 story, what should you do? We have not done even a Reiki to understand.
Not aware.
What, hello?
I said we are not aware of that.
Sir, I'll give you an answer. If you are on whichever floor you are, you should go down to ground. People go into their balconies, they might go to the roof thinking that somebody will come and pick them up by a fire tender snorkel. No, sir. You have to go down to the ground. So we can create with FICCI certain very small booklet of 5 pages, which can give a basic fundamental understanding to the people, which I assure you, most of them will not have the answers.
Sorry, I lost connection in between.
I think, Gauravji, we can look at FICCI creating some small handbook of 5-6 pages only, where some basics of kitchen fire, exits, lighting, sprinklers, we can just touch upon some topics to enlighten the people.
Sure. Definitely. So, okay, I'll take quick one or two more questions.
Yes, sir.
So one question is coming from Mr. Dharmesh. He's asking, as you discuss for BA air, there is a standard for air replenishment system for supply breathing air to fire fighting in emergency. I think there is no provision in NBC 2016. Does it needs of time, especially in case of Indian Fire Services?
Sir, I'm very thankful to you to give me this input. I urge you to write this requirement to be incorporated for buildings more than 100 meters tall in the National Building Code of India. I've already made a presentation to the committee. They have said that this technology is very good. Committee cannot adopt all the things, but I need colleagues like you who are intelligent to give this recommendation to BIS under international prescribed requirements. These are the technologies we should adopt. I tell you from my experience, we will be taking up, but your recommendation will strengthen our hands.
Sure. Definitely, Sandeep ji will definitely work with you in these areas. And you know, there are a few more general questions, but with my experience, I can just share that we actually we have seen these problems in a lot of, you know, buildings which are especially which has, you know, these glass facade, and you know they are just like a capsule in case of fire. The panels are not openable, and you know all those situation arises. You just indicated, you know, in your presentation that there is a provision where you can open up these glass panels, and that is made mandatory by now NBC. So those things I think definitely are going to help us. Also, in case of high-rise buildings, there are a lot of issues in case of fire safety, which are there, and a lot of people are actually asking about the residential building and high-rise skyscrapers. So I think there are a lot of issues to discuss and address jointly, and I think we can take it up together subsequently. So thank you very much, Sandeep ji, for being with us today, and you know take us through took us through a lot a very good detailed presentation on the NBC, and how NBC is giving a very detailed guideline on the fire safety in different situations and different kind of buildings, and what are the areas of improvement which we should now work together to make the code more inclusive and more practical rather. So thank you very much.
I have only one word to say before we close it. I always tell, and I might be repeating it, but I don't mind repeating it for next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Please respect your staircases like you respect your mother. Because if you do not take care of your staircase, don't keep it clean, don't have any kind of, if you start putting in carpets and you start putting in over there mattresses.
Correct. I think there is some Sandeep ji is having some network issue. But we got the message. What he was saying that respect your staircases. I think, and that is very correctly he said. So by the time Sandeep ji joins us back, I would now like to welcome the next speaker, Karthikeyan Gandhi Raja, who is the program and project manager at UL India. So before I hand over the panel to him, I would like to briefly introduce Mr. Karthikeyan. He is currently working as program manager for built infra segment in UL India Private Limited, and I think we all know about the UL. Mr. Karthikeyan has more than 18 years of experience in the field of construction MEP services industry, and he's a committee member of NBC 2016 Part 4 Fire and Life Safety. In his current role, he is spearheading the built environment fire safety audit technical team. He has been instrumental in establishing the building inspection services in India and Middle East for underwriter laboratories, and attended Nfpa training in US. Prior to his current role, he was associated with Total Environment Building Systems Private Limited and Fire Pro Systems Private Limited. So welcome, Mr. Karthikeyan, and over to you now.
Very good afternoon to everyone. Is my audio is clear, sir?
Yes, you are audible. You are audible.
Okay. Thank you. So I will go into presentation mode. Just a moment.
Sure.
Yeah, I hope things are clear. Is it visible?
No, not now. Just a second. I think we can't see your screen. Just a second.
Okay, 1 minute.
Thank you, Gauravji. I'll take the leave. I think the number of participants have gone too high. So thank you so much, Gauravji.
Always welcome, Sandeep ji. Always welcome.
Thank you, sir. Good luck to you, sir. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. I will attend this presentation as a spectator. Thank you, sir.
Sure, definitely.
Yes, sir. Is it visible now?
Yeah. Now we can see it.
Okay. Once again, very good afternoon to everyone. After a very wonderful session from Mr. Sandeep Goel, it will be very tough to on the fire safety norms again. I will try to go away from the topics what we touched upon, and we have wonderful another 30-40 minutes time available. We'll try to learn whatever things possible. And this presentation, I just have this is a content, the codes and standards for built environment, and we will talk about a bit on state bylaw regulations, Factories Act, oil gas standards, some of passive fire protection measures. In often overlook the fire protection as a very as a very basic thing, and performance-based standards and its approach, and some of the case studies based on our experience. Why we have to do a fire safety audit, and this question comes often from public and many fraternity people. It may be a part of a pre-occupancy process. Somebody built a building and they want to ensure that the entire building is properly in place and well designed and well installed, and so they can do a fire audit. And in response to compliance, and they may be having issues with their existing systems, and there may be a problem with the fire protection system or a passive fire protection system. Based on the compliance, they can raise for audit requirement, and it is mandated, as rightly mentioned by Mr. Sandeep, that they know as per NBC, for all high-rise building, for every 2 years, no third-party audit has to be done for any facility. And as part of a formal regular program, they can have it as a periodical program other than the mandate. And they can keep once in 6 months or once in a year also, or based on their the infrastructure and building, they can anybody can plan. And very importantly, due to near miss incidents, any latest fire accidents happened, and that is a wake-up call that any building needs to be checked for, let's say, aging building materials, aging building systems, which may trigger further bigger fire in the future. So coming to built environment, as very detailedly mentioned by NBC, is the mother document. And what is the mandatory code is or the enforcement authority. So they are the people, they are going to governments, and in the form of bylaws, and like Kerala Act or any other state bylaws are there, and even city bylaws are there, and it on the requirement and geographical location and their infrastructure to take our emergency. These bylaws has been framed. So the bylaws are the mandatory and code, and of course the bylaw is extracted mostly from the NBC. And the third one is other national codes. Often we are being developed still to improve, and there are for special buildings, we are ready to develop a code. Those kind of a thing, and we can refer back to the Nfpa, and Nfpa have standards and codes. We can refer back. Then coming to the other aspects, IS standards. What is the difference between the NBC and the IS standard is that the standards will tell you how to install. The code will say the when to install. So this is the difference between the codes and standard. The NBC will say always the when the what to be installed and how to install. We have to go to the IS standards. Then for the industrial segments, there are a lot of factories, and there is a MSME sector, there is a heavy machinery sectors, and those kind of areas where DG Fosle come into picture. Director General Factory Advice Service and Labor Institute, under which Factories Act it will be coming a document for each state. Each state also having a different document based on their special economic zone and their type of manufacturing and other industries. Then the other important body is the Oil Industry and Safety Directorate, OISD, which is a backbone like for companies like ONGC and other sectors who are related to oil and gas. The other important regulation and guidelines to know is like a Tariff Advisory Committee, which is not is active, but people still refers back for insurance kind of assessments. And General Insurance Council people, they have their set of requirements, though they don't have very publicly available documents, and each company have their own norms in terms of ensuring the proper. A disaster management authority often develop most of the guidelines for the larger picture of any disaster like that, in which fire also is one of the part, and most of the extract taken from the sea. Goods manufacturing practice widely followed in the pharma industry and medicine manufacturing industry. And why we are discussing all those things, when we go to inspect, we'll see a different structures, and most of them are demanded based on their stipulation, like any pharma manufacturing units, they will have a airlock between one location to other because of the clean room environment and requirements. Hence, and those things has to be in line with the fire safety norms. I know different in those kind of factories. Hence, GMP requirements and NBC we have to cross verify, and which has to be those kind of measures how to take. And NABH is a body is a nature, and they do specify some requirements, but it's very minimal in nature. But again, those things. People confuse that NABH approval is equal to things. NABH is completely a different requirement compared to the fire safety. To WASHA is internationally followed standard originated from US, and we fire audit for industries. We can refer a lot of reference material from OSHA. Built a Mr. Sandeep covered in-depth examples with the part 4 is our major lookout. We will try to even ask this question in the chat box that is applicable. So I will try to give kind of examples that any high-rise building in India, it requires to be followed NBC. It's a 15-meter in height in general as per NBC, and building having area more than 500 square meter that needs to have fire safety norms to be followed, and they having height above 9 meter. Even education building having 9 meter and above, they have to follow NBC. Other than that, if any owner they are building their own building which is lesser than 15 meter, the owner of the building and the party, however, decide to apply the provisions of this part to buildings other than those. Even this category, you are willing to fire safety norms, and NBC help you out and where to install what. The other aspect, before applying any code or even referring, how to understand is Am I audible? Been told voice is breaking. Hello, hello.
Yeah, Mr. Karthikeyan, your voice is breaking. Maybe some network issue. So
Okay,
if you can switch off your video, maybe that will help.
I will try to do this at 1 minute.
Yeah, seems to be some bandwidth issue, so you can try by switching off your camera. Yeah,
Now please check. Is that okay?
yeah, it is. Yeah, it is better.
Okay, okay. Thank you for. Yeah. So when we select any building, and we have to categorize the building in different category. The category mentioned in here from group A to J, and the NP is mostly applicable this thing, but predominantly it is applicable from residential. Then the industrial storage and hazardous also we can follow NBC and Trees Act and other OISD kind of in the lower group. More than 150 standards are there, and each one detail of the fire equipment. Even for a branch pipe, we have a standard. For everything, how to install, how to maintain, how to test. So for everything, you can see here the first. Hello. The first three standards, IS standards, 2189, the one for I used. You can see here the first one is for fire reduction and alarm system, fire extinguisher, and third one is for automatic sprinkler system and requirements. So so these are all the over the Google. You can download it if you have any kind of requirement. You can it will help. Hello. Still voice is not clear. Hello.
Yes, your voice is breaking. I don't know. Some technical issue is there, network issue. So sometimes it is clear. It's like breaking and off.
Volume is also a minute.
The volume is okay. When your voice is very clear, but the problem is that it breaks out.
Okay. Just give me a 1 minute, sir. I will, if you don't mind,
No
1
issue,
minute.
no issue. You can.
1 minute. Hello. Now please try, sir. I think I have tried my best and restarted my modem. Hello. Hello.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, you're able to
Yes,
hear.
yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, I will try because I'm in yeah, I think some people are saying voice is not clear and it's breaking. I think
Yeah, it is. It is. In fact, your voice is clear, but it is breaking.
1 minute. We'll try to. But I was able to hear Mr. This thing. very
So,
clearly. I was not having any
yeah.
problem.
You
Yeah.
have any? You are using Wi-Fi. So can you try one thing that you disconnect all the other devices connected to the same Wi-Fi, or you
That's
can
what
just
I
try.
just did, sir. In fact, that's what I did. I
Okay.
was just
So now we can hear you, so you can go
switched off.
ahead. So we can hear you loud and clear, so you can go ahead.
Okay. Okay. That anyway, I
Yeah,
will stop time. I will just proceed. Uh,
yeah, you just
yeah,
proceed. It's
and
okay as of now.
yes, sir. Could you please? It shows 50% in my volume bar.
Sorry.
If it volume in your this thing, um,
Yeah, Mr. Karthik, I think you are not able to get a good bandwidth on your Wi-Fi currently. I think that is where the
okay,
issue is coming in. It is quite
okay,
possible.
okay,
So if in case the mobile network is good in your area, you can check with the mobile hotspot also.
Yes.
okay. I will try. Hello, hello, hello.
Yes, can hear you.
Yeah, yeah. Is this voice is clear? This is from mobile
Yeah,
hotspot.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
This is much better, much
Better.
better.
Okay, okay, great. Okay,
Yeah.
I will start now again.
Yeah. That's good.
Sorry, I think I messed up. Mm. Is my screen clear?
Yeah,
Yes, it
but
is.
you need to. Yeah. Now it is clear.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Thank you for everybody's patience. Sorry for that. Yes, so IS standards most often used for for example, to take an extinguisher, and you are buying a extinguisher and you don't know how to install it, where to install it, and type of an extinguisher, and how to maintain it, how to test it. So for everything, you need to follow IS standard. So for that, the right IS standard is 2190. So if you go there, and it will say clearly that for ABC or A type or BC type, where to install, and what distance one extinguisher is required, and how to maintain it, etc. So it's applicable to same thing for sprinklers when it comes to 15105. Same thing for fire alarm. 2189 gives a wonderful detailing in terms of how to install a fire detectors or smoke detectors in a building. So similarly, a lot of IS standards are available, more than 150, and whatever I have explained is all basic one. And when it comes to pumps, that 15301 helps that how to install it, and very basic and very small standard as well. So going into bylaws, so bylaws takes the precedence when you have different documents, and people have the question that which one to follow. And you have a building, and you are following NBC 2016 as your design standard, and you don't know which one to be installed, and you have a fire NOC, and you have a state bylaw, and also the NBC. So out of which your fire NOC takes the precedence of all other document. So fire NOC is coming from fire authority and or enforcement authority, who gives the requirements based on their infrastructure and their fighting ability and rescuing ability. So fire NOC has to be given first priority. Then we have to go to state bylaws. So what is state bylaw does? It ensures that uniform development of the buildings in any city, and the public safety against noise, fire, health hazard, and structural failures. So all these things are covered within the state bylaws. And then other very important aspect is FAR and FSI values, very famous. Each city have its own FAR values, which is framed as part of the state bylaws. And city population density, all these things, it is stated or maintained based on the bylaws. The number of basement in any building, it is limited based on the bylaw requirements. And the setback and projection from outside the building, and those things are taken care by state bylaws. Building height, so in which area how much building height can be built, so which is predominantly mentioned by state bylaw. And the site design, like any topography of site plan, how designed or to be maintained, that also stipulation comes from state bylaw. Basically all construction limits of a structure within a city or state, it comes from the bylaws. I'll come to the fire safety. The state fire prevention and fire safety act rules complements the national building code. So what is state bylaw is basically extract from the national building code based on the state requirement. And many of the NBC code provision has been incorporated in various state governments and local bodies in their own building regulations like PWD, etc. And the acts and rules enacted by states are aimed to improve overall status of fire safety measures in the respective states. So as I mentioned, FAR value is a driving factor for many of the states when it's come to density of buildings. Then coming to the OISD, Oil Industry Safe Directorate, which takes care of oil and gas industry, which have many standards, more than 100, in fact, more than 150 standards are there, in which 114 is talking about the safe handling of hazardous chemical. Suppose if you have a chemical storage facility and you want to know how much I can store and how I can store. So you have to refer back to standard 114, and the guidelines on firefighting equipment and appliances in petroleum industry. I know that you have to refer 115. And then coming to the 116, which is fire protection facilities for petroleum refineries and oil and gas processing plants. And the last one is a 117, the fire protection facilities for petroleum depots, terminals, pipeline installation, and lube oil installations. So this is purely the oil and gas areas and applications. They have to follow the OISD norms. Then the last one is the fire prevention and protection system for electrical installation, particular to oil and gas related localities. Then we can understand the Factories Act 1948, which is the oldest act and coming to the fire norms, and it is applies to the most of the special economic zones factories in different states and different cities. So what it says is that the section 38 of Factories Act 1948 it emphasizes that the obligation of occupier, which include to adapt all practicable measure to prevent the outbreak and spread of fire, to provide safe means of escape, to maintain the firefighting equipment properly and to familiarize all the workers with the means of escape during fire and train them in steps to taken in a fire accidents. And the last one is the section 37 also describes the detailed measures to prevent explosion hazard. The state factory rules framed under the Factories Act have prescribed in detail all the steps to be taken to prevent the fire hazard. So this is just an extract of some portion of Factories Act in 1948, and it has got very detailed requirement for each type of manufacturing facility to processing industries. So for each state, it has got its own requirement. Maharashtra have 1963 factory rules, Tamil Nadu have 1950 factory rules, and Gujarat have 1963, etc. And even Telangana have its own, Andhra have its own. So every state have adopted their own factory rules. It is applicable to their own statutory areas. And to come and give an overview of NFPA, there are the NFPA is widely referred document in fire industry. So I thought I will add one slide into it and give some perspective on NFPA. And NFPA full form is a National Fire Protection Association. And when it comes to building, and one has to follow that NFPA 101, which is a life safety code. And this is the first document to refer. Then the fire code. The fire code is code of everything, which means it is also called fire prevention code, which means it includes most of all the chapters from different standards like 13, 14, 20, 25 or 70, 72. Any of these code extract, you can find it in NFPA 1. Suppose if an inspector goes for an inspection and he cannot carry internationally, they cannot carry all the codes, but they can carry at least the one code which touch base with all the code is NFPA 1, which is a fire prevention code. NFPA 13 is widely used in India also. For pipe scheduling method, we use NFPA 13 for sprinkler system, and 20 is also used for fire pump installation, and 25 is used for inspection, testing, and maintenance of water-based fire protection system. NFPA 72 is a fire alarm and signal code, and it is one of the widely accepted code even in the US, and it has got a number of reference material about a gamut of fire safety information. And NFPA 2001 is a standard on clean agent fire extinguishing system. Today we see a lot of clean agent system installed in data centers and other hubs, so which has to follow the NFPA 2001. So to give a perspective, any building which can have multiple hazards, and this one picture from NFPA reference, which gives the detailed idea about this is the illustration of an airport, where you can imagine that the numbers where it mentioned as each as a different outlet, all the colored portion is retail outlets. We can see here there is a dining, there is a gift shop area, there is a ticketing, and there is a load docking area, etc. So it's a perfect example of one application with having multiple hazard. There is a kitchen there and dining there, and it's a different hazard as well. So when we apply our own code, even the mercantile portion comes under the moderate hazard, and dining portion comes under a light hazard, and kitchen comes under moderate hazard, and store moderate hazard. Basement is moderate hazard. I was trying to apply our NBC version of, or the IS version of hazard assessment. So that's how I did this, and this way any building have multiple hazard, and each hazard require a different fire safety solution. The density factors for different hazard will be varying, and the sprinkler selection will be varying. So one has to, anybody who is doing the inspection or designing, and they have to apply their mind properly to identify the hazard. Accordingly, they have to provide the solution. So when it goes to when we go to NBC, our annexure gives different hazard categories, like from annexure B, which is like hazard and high hazard, and there is one more page as well. So this gives the category. Once you select the type of hazard, then you can think the standard. As I mentioned in the previous slides, if you are in the commercial or residential segment of building, then NBC directly applies and you don't need to bother the other codes. Otherwise, if you have a kind of manufacturing and process industries, then you need to apply your codes differently, like a Factories Act also has to be checked, or if it is oil and gas, then OSD has to be checked. So all this thing comes into picture when you properly select the hazard. So coming to maintenance schedule, our IS standard itself gives a very beautiful maintenance checklist. This is from the IS 15105, where table 38 gives a beautiful checklist for each item, for engine, pump, motor, piping, valves, etc. For what is the activity to be done, and how often it has to be maintained. So our code is more than sufficient when it comes to maintenance. People lacks in terms of proper data collection and data maintenance, and they need to follow these kind of requirements from IS, and they can maintain very well. Then coming to the passive fire protection, which is widely in India a forgotten subject, or a neglected subject. We can say that there are many types of passive fire protection systems are there. The initial one is a penetration system, then it is there is a joint system, and there is wall systems, curtain wall systems, which is used in the facade. And there are technologies in this. Before going to technology, there are three parts of Firestop system which needs to be understood properly. And first is the fire rated wall. So any wall, it has to be fire rated to apply the fire penetrant, and that is called the Firestop fill material. And the penetrating item itself, it has to be checked. What is that material? Is it a PVC pipe or metal pipes? So all three factors has to be considered, like a wall and the filling material and the penetrating item. So all together we have to see whether it is a tested item. Otherwise it is not going to give any result. So it is no, products do not have any rating, it's only a system have the ratings. So that's the message we have to take from this. So if some architects or designer considering to install a Firestop in a later stage, they have to consider during the design stage itself that the wall has to be a rated wall, and penetrant material has to be checked, and the filling material type also to be checked. To go more into the detail of filling material, there are technologies available, which is like intumescent is one of the technologies which is widely used for material like PVC penetrant, like any PVC conduits which is piercing through the fire rated wall. Then we right example is to use the intumescence. So how it reacts, the material reacts like before heat, it is it's in normal rigid position. Once it is exposed to the heat, then it is bulges and it covers the gap, and it fills the entire hole of that burned material. And the next one is the endothermic technology, where the wall and the penetrant, it is installed where the filling material absorbs the heat. So this is primarily used in all metal pipes, or pipes which will not deform during the fire. The last one is the elastomeric technology, which is widely used in flexible areas like facade to wall to facade joints, particularly in the edge of the building. So there are many types of facades. So I will try to give more view on, the overview on the facade, since facade is today's hot topic, and most of the building having facade. And there are different types of facade typologies. One is a curtain wall, then build-up system with cavity, then the build-up system with no cavity. And curtain wall have further detailing like stick and unitized system, and then the build-up system with cavity is a rain screen masonry, and build-up system with no cavity, precast concrete, EIFS, etics, and insulated panels.
Mr. Karthikeyan, if you could conclude in say in 5 minutes time.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Definitely, I will rush through. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
please.
Yeah, there are two major materials which comes into facade is the insulation and cladding materials, where you can see here the insulation, all the green materials is fire resistant in nature, and all the red materials are mostly a combustible materials, so both in the insulation and cladding category. So how it is done in India, some of the example we can see here, the installation is not done properly, and people are using GI plates, and they are using unrated sealants, etc. So our NBC gives kind of a guidance that all gaps between floor slab and facade assembly shall be sealed at all levels by approved fire resistant sealant material, and equivalent rating of that of a floor slab. So one has to understand that any material, and they have to select properly. So these are all the number of standards available, and there are different foreign standards available. Even we have our own highest standards on that. So coming to study, once any assessment is being done, it is being reported like this, and the complaint summary will be given against these two, like against NBC and Bylaw, and we'll summarize the compliance level where red marks are non-compliance, and with the reason why it is non-compliance. And very important topic, I will rush this area, the exception and deviation. Exception deviations to general provisions of requirements of individual occupancies are given as applicable to each type of occupancy, starting from 6.1 to 6.9. This has to be applied where you have a building which is very special design, and you want to apply performance-based code to that kind of building, and then definitely this class can be applied, and we can use the performance based codes and assessment tool. So what are the tool available? This is the general picture of how the simulation model can be done as alternate. The blue portion is what is the CFD session, and the green portion is what the egress session, and what we are arriving in the end of it is available slow evacuation time, and the right side what we are arriving is RSET is the required safe evacuation time, and by comparing both we will identify the safety margin of any building. I'll try to take a few examples quickly, and these are all the timeline breakups of evacuation. You can see in the vertical portion that fire starts, there is awareness comes into the occupants, the evacuation starts, and there is RSET, it's supposed to happen the first, then the ASET, which means the available safe evacuation time delayed, which means that people are not evacuated with the time of fire also, and when further they are delayed in the building, then it is called asset incapacitation. So all these things we can apply in the code, and we can verify the model into software, and we can use the different kind of models in that, and by applying the different categories, by using different type of even this example is from hospital, one of these child care hospital, and the speed of infant and caretaker, and type of patient, and the range of speed, everything we can put, and we can come to a conclusion that each floor how the distribution happens, and the bottommost floor you can see more concentration because it's a more outpatient area. The upper floors are more of wards and operation theaters, etc. So we can go to the congestion floor specifically, where the congestion is taking place, and we can address them independently. And this example is directly, from Mumbai, where hospitals, supposed to have a ramp, and this hospital does not have a ramp, and they got all approvals, and performance-based assessment is critical here, and so that they know that where the congestion is happening and how to remove the patients, and and how they are going to create a fire barriers. and the result will say that the columns and different types of cases. What we identified is the preparation time with 3 minutes is the best they can have. If they are going to 7 minutes or 15 minutes of time, and they are exceeding the global the guideline value of 20 minutes. More than 20 minutes, anything can happen, and hence any evacuation has to be very much within the 20 minutes time. So there are different strategies for any high-rise building. There's a total evacuation, there is a phased evacuation, and there are strategies like worst case evacuation by challenging the staircase completely, closing out the staircase, how the building going to perform. It can be verified, and we can verify that whether my refuge area can hold the entire population or not. That can be verified, and after that, the entire result can be compared that which type of evacuation works for our building or any building. So then it comes to the other assessment to identify the asset value. This is one example of one hotel, and hotel with different seating tables, and the red box is the fire location, and we placing all the sprinklers and detectors, and we do the assessment by doing the people distribution, and we'll come to know that when the sprinklers are getting activated, how what time and people are moving out of this building. Why this assessment entirely it is being done? Because, and this is a special tower which has got only one staircase, where as I mentioned, as a deviation code says, this building has been built with one staircase. If only one staircase is there, and there are hundreds of occupants, how safe they are going to evacuate the building, and that needs to be checked with the help of technology, which is possible. That's what it is being done. And this is the result of that, how much tenable time is there, and what is the maximum time available is the 83 seconds for the fire location, and the other parameters are fine. So the visibility is the concern, and smoke layer height is the concern, and they have been given with a number of recommendation that selection of material has to be proper. So this is the final result of the RSET. So ideally the RSET has to be more. Here RSET is 70 seconds, RSET is 46 seconds. Hence the building is safe, but ideally if you have more safety margin, and the building is much safer. So any modification, it can be done if it is in design stage, or if it is in existing building, then retrofitting needs to be done. Thanks for all your patience. I hope I completed on time, and sorry for that connection disruption. Any questions, I'm happy to take.
For presentation on the audit. That is a very important aspect of entire fire safety regulation, just to ensure that everything is correctly in place. And there you have the audit and related regulations. So thank you very much to take us through all the important part of that. As far as the question, I can see one question here, if you can quickly respond to that.
Yes. Yes.
So Mr. Pinat would like to know that is water mist based system can be used in the data centers.
Of course, sir, it can be used. It can be used. It's their call, and if you're damaging the equipment,
Okay.
whatever they have, they can what they are having redundancy is their call.
Okay.
Some people have yeah, different level of redundancy, and if they have, they can use the water mist as well.
Yeah, because he specifically asked for data centers. So what I could think of is that maybe the data center which has a lot of electronic equipments there, and so that's why maybe he would like to specifically ask this question, whether he
Hello. Hello.
Gaurav, you
Yeah,
can
sorry,
also switch off
I
your
think
video.
I lost my
You.
connection. Yeah.
We lost you in the middle.
Yeah. No. I was just thanking Mr. Karthikeyan for the entire, for his time and contribution, and would like to move to the next speaker now.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. The next topic is that is the fire safety risk assessment and fire hazards. Fire safety assessment makes an important part of the entire, just to ensure that everything is correctly in place, and about the fire hazards you are gathered with, and these hazards could be different, based on different workplaces and the environment in which you are working. So to cover this topic, we have with us Commander Karthik Vik. He is Director Safety and Security in Netrika Consulting. Just would like to briefly introduce him, Dr. Commander Vik. So Commander Karthik Vik is President Director, as I just said, at Netrika Consulting, and he looks after the security and risk consulting practices. Commander Vik is a lead auditor ISO 45001 and SkyTouch auditor for hotel safety and security. He is an Indian Navy veteran and an alumnus of National Defence Academy, Pune, with over 20 certification, covers security, business, continuity planning, disaster management, among all other areas. His expertise lies in the field of technology-based security and safety solutions, security and safety audits, business development, identification and mitigation of risks, project management, automation, and surveillance, to name a few. So with this, I would like to hand over the dais now to Commander Karthik Vik. Commander Vik, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Gaurav.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
thank
yes.
you, Gaurav. Thank you, Vicky, for this opportunity and this wonderful idea of holding this practice and training session with regards to the fire and safety aspect. So my topic has been clearly elucidated, and I'll just shift over and start sharing my screen. And from one Karthikeyan, we shift to another Karthik. So bear with the Karthik today.
We heard something called Karthik calling Karthik.
Affirmative.
Yeah. Oh God, you have a very dangerous cover slide.
Exactly. It's fire, and if there is no red in it, then there is no fun in it, right?
Correct.
Our aim is to ensure that the fire takes a deep-rooted awareness into our minds, and such that we learn to respect it. As I think it was Raki ma'am who mentioned about the association of fire with us Indians. And so
yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So how do I switch off the video?
There's a stop video button at the bottom.
Okay, never mind. In case we have a problem with the bandwidth, then I shall go about that. So the content today under the topic that I'm going to cover, that is fire safety risk assessment and fire hazards. Fire hazards is primarily things which you will be considering while you undertake a fire safety risk assessment. And but they're separately to be covered as the topic goes, and so I've made a mention of them separately as well, just to give you a little more insight into the same. The content, the topics that I'll be covering is fire safety risk assessment. What do we understand by fire risk? And what I've done is I've put fire safety risk assessment process. My understanding of the training requirement of the session is that if we are able to elucidate a stepwise process, it would help the audience and everybody to actually undertake the risk fire safety risk assessment, and help them to make their places safer. Then we go into the fire risk factors. In this, what I've done is I've covered a few aspects which should be, as an example, should be covered when you're undertaking the safety risk assessment with regards to fire. Common pitfalls that we generally go about, and what should a good assessment actually be, and And thereafter, I move on to a hazard, that is concept of hazard. What is a fire hazard? Elements of fire, which we all know, but I just wanted to touch upon them because they have a bearing on identifying your fire hazards and sources of fire hazards. And that's where I'll say thank you, because I think by that time it should be about 1615 hours. So moving on to fire safety risk assessment. For short, it is also called fire safety assessment, or FSA. Okay. So if you come across these terms, you should not be, flummoxed, because both of them, all of them mean the same thing. So what do we mean by fire risk assessment? It's an organized way of looking at what could probably cause harm to people from a fire. So that is what we want to identify, so that we can protect ourselves and put in mitigating efforts to ensure safety. So what does it help with? It helps with determining the chances of fire occurring and the dangers from fire that the workplace poses for people who are working there. Workplace, factories, even houses for that matter. And its purpose is to determine whether existing fire precautions are adequate enough and reasonable relative to the overall risks presented, or if it requires reduction via control measures. So your fire safety risk assessment is looking at achieving this as an end result, as an output. And what do we understand from fire risk? So there are a number of definitions that do the round. I find this to be simple, and therefore I've put it across. Fire risk may be defined as the likelihood of a fire occurring multiply as in multiplication, by the severity of the fire. That is the harm potential. What is the harm potential of the fire, and consequences in terms of loss of life, fire spread, damage to assets, etc. Now, what does harm potential constitute? Harm potential primarily from a fire hazard depends on the development of a fire originating from the hazard. What are the chances? What is the likelihood that a hazard may lead to the origination of a fire, and the potential consequences in terms of loss of life, property, or anything else for that matter. So when an assessor comes about and he wants to carry out a fire risk, what he's trying to do is trying to determine the potential for harm, okay, and makes a judgment on the possible outcome of the hazard which he has identified, which may lead to a fire. What are some of the points that may be considered, should be considered? Potential for ignition, the number of times the situation could occur, how many times it can happen, you need to be aware about. The factors that could cause it to occur, it could be the competence of people involved, it could be the environmental conditions, it could be the conditions of the equipment also. Okay, so all of them go into understanding, the potential or the harm potential. The development potential, number of factors can again need to be considered. Not the least, the length of time the fire could burn, how much before it is detected. So there is a time or a heat or a smoke level at which the sensors operate, So till such time that happens for the alarm to be raised, the fire has already been burning. As I said, there is no smoke without fire. But for the smoke to be detected, it takes a little while. And by the time the alarm comes to you, the fire has already been burning or it has taken seat. And therefore, you need to know that, you need to factor that in. How long before the fire threatens the means of escape? As my previous speaker, clearly identified, the time 3 minutes to evacuation, or the 60 seconds that he showed with regards to one staircase going down. Those are important aspects which need to be understood and factored in while you are identifying your risks which are arising from fire. Factors such as building, construction. I think Mr. Sandeep Goel, with his excellent knowledge about the NBC, put forth a number of points, and it's a treasure trove, that NBC, and one must actually treat it as a Bible and read it very often, especially fire safety experts. So factors such as building construction and contents will also have an impact. So this is what the fire risk scenario looks like, and how we go about identifying the risk associated with a fire. Let's put a method to madness. As you would have seen with the previous slide, there are far too many things which probably need to be considered. As you can understand by the number of IAS and the codes that exist, and the NBC itself has got so many clauses, so many chapters, and so many paragraphs. Okay, that if you don't put a method to madness, you would never be able to identify the correct risks that emanate from a fire or a hazard which may cause fire. Okay, so what I've done is I've divided this process into 5 steps. Step 1 is to identify the fire hazards within your premises. It's a very important first step. Then you need to identify the people at risk. The situation will change if it's probably a old age home or a hospital or a school or a office going building where everyone is fit and fine, as compared to an old age home where probably people are not able to move around, as compared to an hospital where a lot of them are invalidated and can't be moved, cannot move on their own. So step 3 would be evaluate and decide if the existing fire safety arrangements are satisfactory or need improving. Okay. And 4 is recording the findings. It's very important that we do that, and there has to be a process to it. Mr. Karthikeyan said that when you're auditing, the way you go about assessing something and past precedents is something that needs to be considered. So therefore, if you have a proper plan, if you have a proper record keeping there, you would actually be able to ascertain that in the past so many times so and so thing failed, which led to a fire, and therefore these many actions were taken, and still they are failing. So maybe there is something else to it. So recording the findings, producing an emergency plan, instructions, informing and training. These are very important areas. Training, as they say, the more we sweat in peace, the less we bleed in war. That's the saying what we have in the armed forces, and it holds true here as well. As Mr. Sandeep Goel also had mentioned, that it is a war when you're fighting a fire, and what you need to do is train for it. And training means you need to sweat it out. Training means you need to take your training seriously. Training means it needs to be drilled every day, in and out, same thing. Okay, every day might not be possible, but at least there should be a regular periodic way of training people and ensuring that they are getting the exact message that you want to convey. And step 5, arrange to regularly review the assessment. So this is a false or a misnomer that once an assessment has been carried out, it holds good for the lifetime, at least your lifetime, or maybe 10, 20 lifetimes, but it isn't so. We will look into how regular an assessment needs to be. So let's look at this now. Step 1. What do you need to identify? You need to identify sources of ignition. What could ignite or cause an ignition, such as naked flames, heaters, or some commercial processes. Sources of fuel, such as waste products, display materials, textiles, or overstock products. Sources of oxygen, such as air conditioning systems or medical or commercial oxygen supplies. These are the things which you need to identify when you're going about identifying the fire hazards. Later, in the later half of the presentation, I will cover upon the fire hazards. That's the reason why I'm not going into details over here. So you must also consider structural features such as ducts and flues, unstopped holes cut into firewalls, large areas of combustible materials, open roof spaces, excessively long escape routes, etc. So primarily, it is a mix of not only the ignition, the fuel, the oxygen. It is also the structural features which actually may provide or help with providing any of these 3 items, 3 elements which are necessary, okay, or otherwise. Step 2, identify the people at risk. I've already elucidated this with an example. Just to run through the list, anyone who may be asleep on the premises, those present in large numbers. That's where the PA systems, as Mr. Goel mentioned, is of utmost essence. We in the Navy, I think Gaurav mentioned it, compartments. Okay, so I will tell you about the drills that we do over there. In the Navy, on board a ship, when you're out at sea or a submarine, fire is the largest threat after the enemy. I mean, enemy comes later, but first comes fire. Because if you have a fire and if it is not in control, you have nowhere to run other than jump into the sea, with the seabed being about 5,000 meters below. So anyone who may be asleep needs to be told about it. Maybe a PA system might be of help over there, a phone maybe. Those present in large numbers, where those who are unfamiliar with the layout, some people who have come in new, some people who are visiting, those exposed to a specific fire risk, those who have impaired sight, hearing, mobility, or any other disability, people working near to fire ranges, people working alone or in remote or isolated areas, children or parents with babies, elderly or infirm, any people unable to react quickly, external contractors, agency, and temporary staff. So all these, I mean, this list is not a very complete list. It can never be. You can always add more to it. But these are the things that need to be considered, especially when you're identifying the people who may be at risk on your premises. Step 3, evaluate and decide if the existing safety arrangements are satisfactory or need improvement. So here I've got about a few sub-steps over here. The first is determining the risk of a fire occurring. How do we define that, and how do we quantify it, or how do we make it easier for us? Taking into account the fire prevention measures observed at the time of the risk assessment, it is considered that the hazard from fire, probability of ignition at the building is maybe low, medium, or high. So you could define or identify the risk of a fire occurring under these 3 categories, low, medium, or high. Low could be hardly any risk from fire, few combustible materials, or no highly inflammable substances, and virtually no source of heat. Medium could be there are quantities of combustible materials and sources of heat, but a fire would remain confined or spread slowly. High, a serious risk to life from fire, substantial quantities of combustible materials, highly flammable substances, or likelihood of the rapid spread of fire, heat, or smoke. Now, you must be wondering why it is important for us to categorize them. It is important because you will realize that how we mitigate or provide mitigation for the identified risks would come out of this. What should be our stance? How much should you do? How much amount should you do? And what activities need to be taken to ensure or to minimize the risk? This definition or categorization will help. And my word of advice, while you're doing it for your own organizations, you must make these definitions clearly legible. What do you mean by low? Can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Yeah, we can hear you clearly.
Okay, thank you. Number 2, determine the potential consequences if a fire was to occur. Okay, taking into account maybe the nature of the building and the occupants, very important, as well as the fire protection and procedural arrangements observed at the time of risk assessment. It is considered that the consequences for life safety in the event of fire would be, you can probably put them in these: slight harm, moderate harm, or extreme harm. Okay, now if slight harm is what you're going to use, it should probably mean outbreak of fire unlikely to result in serious injury or death of any occupant. Moderate harm could be, outbreak of fire could result in injury of 1 or more occupants, but it is unlikely to involve multiple fatalities. Extreme harm could be significant potential for serious injury or death of 1 or more occupants. The reason why I'm using it could be and you could use is because it is important. You may use these templates are available on the internet, or otherwise you may use them verbatim, but it is good for you to understand what you're using and what you mean by it, and disseminate to everybody that this is what it means. When deciding the level of harm, you must consider occupants sleeping on the premises. Okay, this is something that people generally forget, and especially if you have shift-wise system, places where workers probably come and stay or sleep in the night, it is important that you consider that. Moving on to point number 3. Now remember, this is step 3 and point 3 of step 3. That is evaluation and deciding the existing fire safety arrangements, whether they are satisfactory or whether they need improving. So once using the results from 1 and 2, the steps 1 and 2, which I have elaborated earlier, you can use this particular table, all right, to accordingly arrive at the risk to life from fire at the building. It could be trivial, it could be tolerable, it could be moderate, it could be substantial, it could be intolerable. And on the table, as you can see, there's a matrix. Potential consequences if a fire was to occur goes the right on top, and on the left hand side is the risk of fire occurring. So let's take the risk of fire occurring if it is medium, and moderate harm is something which is likely to happen, then the risk which exists is moderate. So what you've done is that you have converted your identification of the hazards, all right, and their capability to cause harm into a matrix wherein you arrived at what kind of risk these pose to you. All right. Moving on to the next point under step 3, that is determining the action level and time scale. Now this is important again, as you will see, because if you don't know if there is something which is imperative and you don't put it under the imperative or important thing, you will never get around to doing it. You'll not be able to prioritize, because you will be surprised that the clearer your priorities are with regards to what actions need to be taken, only then can you act at the speed of light and actually save people in an emerging situation or a scenario where fire is causing threat. Okay. Now, risk level trivial, no action is required and no detailed records need to be kept. However, the situation should be monitored regularly, always tolerable, no major additional controls required. However, the situation requires ongoing monitoring, and there may be a need for consideration of improvements that involve minor or limited costs. Moderate. Now, you see, even the cost can be included into this, because at the end of the day, as a fire safety manager, or when you're doing a risk assessment, the management on top is interested, everything is fine. You've done a beautiful job. How much is it going to cost? If it's going to cost the earth, is it possible? What do we need to do about it? So this is something which you can include in this particular table. Moderate. It is essential that efforts be made to reduce the risk. Risk reduction measures should be implemented within a defined time period, and ongoing monitoring is required. Now, a defined time period is essential. You may have done a wonderful job. You may have identified the fire hazard. You may have identified everything according surrounding that fire hazard and how detrimental it is, whether the risk is moderate or high. Everything would have done. But if you would have probably identified the action also which is to be taken. But if you don't identify the time period in which the action is to be completed, then that fire hazard will exist. And why it is essential to identify the time period in which should be covered, because in that interim period, when you are introducing the mitigating effort, at least you will be able to put on greater vigilance, or maybe change the process so that which reduces the threat because of the fire or the harm because of the fire. So where moderate risk is associated with consequences that constitute extreme harm, further assessments may be required to establish more precisely the likelihood of harm as a basis for determining the priority for improved control measures. This is also important. Substantial, considerable resources may have to be allocated to reduce the risk. If the building is unoccupied, it should not be occupied until the risk has been reduced. If the building is occupied, urgent action should be taken. And if the risk level is intolerable, building should not be occupied until the risk is reduced. So this is how, when you have identified your risks related to fire, how, if you were to quantify them with regards to the risk level that they are associated with, you will be able to understand the action which is required automatically, and even the time scale and the associated cost with it. So remove and mitigate the risks. That is what need improving means. If the existing fire safety measures are assessed as inadequate, action must be taken to remove or reduce any fire hazards where possible in order to reduce the risks identified. For example, replace highly inflammable materials with less flammable ones. Make sure you separate flammable materials from sources of ignition. Ensure the smoking ban is enforced. Reduce evacuation times and escape route lengths. I mean, if you find perennially that your fire escape routes are being used for smoking, best is to ensure that they go somewhere else. In the first place, that if a fire exit route or the fire exit staircases are being used for smoking, that means your doors, which should be one way, are not functioning properly. Because if the gentleman has gone out to smoke, how is he coming back inside? Okay. Reduce evacuation times and escape route lengths. Provide additional escape routes. Install additional fire alarm call points. Improve fire signage. Consider installing active firefighting systems, examples, sprinklers. Appoint fire wardens. Increase programs of fire safety training. I mean, the list can go on, but these are just a few of them which I thought as an example may help you. Last but not the least, the step 4, sorry, not the last, step 4 is second last. Record the findings, produce an emergency plan, instruct, inform, and train. In this step, you must record, plan, instruct, inform, and train. I'm not going to go into the details with regards to what is required over here. We all more or less should know. But record has to be kept, a proper plan has to be there, what actions has to be taken, SOP should be there, instructions should be regularly disseminated, information should be shared on time, in time, real time, as the need may be, and training should also be a periodic affair which should be seriously conducted. I was doing risk assessment wherein the fire safety was also a part of it. And the company is almost 30 years old. And when you went about on the shop floor, what one found was that the fire risk, not the fire risk, the training with regards to firefighting was being carried out periodically, but all the employees who were 5 years and above in the manufacturing facility would depute some youngster to go for the training, and they would eventually get trained. And in the bargain, the senior lot had completely forgotten what exactly is a fire extinguisher or how it is to be used. So the training has to be periodic, and it has to be for everybody. Everybody should be a part of it. You will need to record the fire hazard identified in step 1 and the people at risk identified in step 2, and you must also record the actions you took under step 3. All right. So that is what a record will help. It will help you to identify mistakes if there are any. It will help you to revise your plan, and probably if you were to go to another place and some other incumbent would take over, it would probably help him not to start from scratch, but to hit the road running and maybe help him better it. Step 5, which is the last step, arrange to regularly carry out the review of the assessment which you have undertaken. Now, fire risk assessment should always be up to date and valid. In our context, as both the speakers prior to me also mentioned, in fact, yesterday also they mentioned, we tend to take these things lackadaisically. In fact, security itself is taken as a very lackadaisical subject. Until something hits the fan and starts blasting all over, we don't bother. You will need to re-examine your fire risk assessment if you suspect it is no longer valid, such as after a near miss, if it happens, if a fire takes place, if you are able to control it, but why did it take place in the first place? And you should assess it, whether it requires you to review the assessment which you have carried out earlier. And every time there is a significant change to the level of risk in your premises, say your process for manufacturing something has changed, and it involves maybe greater use of some hazardous chemical or fuel or whatever the case may be. So it requires a reassessment of your earlier assessment which you have carried out. Other factors may be type, layout, nature of the premises, type and number of people using the premises, type, location, layout of plant and equipment, changes to the premises, people, plant and equipment. Any of these things should, and I am using the word should, trigger your conduct of a review of an assessment which is already in existence. All right. So increase in quantity of material stored, storage of new material, processes and procedures carried out on site, changes in shift patterns, particularly new night shifts. This is interesting. We feel that this has got nothing to do, but just imagine if more number of people start coming in at a particular moment of time or during a particular shift, you have a problem at your hand, because in case of a fire, how are they going to be, exiting? Where are they going to be exiting from? Have you taken care of the extra bodies or the footsteps or the people who are going to be on the premises? Whether they'll be the fire safety stairways which are there, are they sufficient to take care of this? Do you need to have a plan, another plan in action or in place? All these things would come back if you were to review the assessment. Now let's look at the fire risk factors which I had mentioned. There are a number of them. I have already mentioned a few. All of them form a part of the factors which can be risk, which can cause a fire risk. So although every fire risk is unique, assessment is unique, the following fire prevention and fire risk factors should be checked by the assessor as part of the assessment. The building's construction layout and use, I have already mentioned. Nature and number of occupants, it goes without saying. Electrical equipment, as Mr. Sandeep Goel also mentioned, electrical equipment as a potential source of ignition, and invariably, there are times when loads change. Loads change in the sense that you develop the manufacturing facility for an X amount of load, and today you have added more machinery, and the factory is working at a greater load, and you have not actually taken into consideration of revamping your electrical equipment, where the building has a history of any fire loss, defense against arson, smoking areas, as well as prevention measures that have been taken to prevent fires caused by smoking, protection against fires that are caused by lighting, many times I've seen, outside the building. So there are places, corners where the place for smokers is made. And in one assessment that I was carrying out, there was a small room which was close by on the outside itself, where kerosene and inflammable material was being stored over there. And the people who were smoking would not necessarily butt out their cigarettes and just throw it into that the soil pit which was made over there, the sand pit, and it would, with the wind, get carried too close to that particular area, and which can cause fire. So all these things have to be looked into. Protection against fires that are caused by lighting, installed and portable heating devices that can trigger fires, important, because especially in areas where probably heaters are being used to inside the office premises, can cause fire. You have carpeted floors. If it's not properly done, it can lead to fire. Any fire hazards that have been introduced by outside contractors or building works, if they've come to work, general housekeeping in key areas being kept clear of any combustible material. This is another source of fire. If you see most of the places where the housekeeping staff keeps its stuff are caboose, not ventilated. Invariably, there's a lot of fumes emanating because of materials being kept over there, and even because of with the heat and the drying over there of the wet mops, with time it can cause lead to combustible material being available over there, which can cause fire. Configuration and maintenance of escape routes, storage arrangements for any flammable and dangerous liquids. Emergency lighting has been properly installed and is in good working order. Mr. Sandeep Goel also, I think, mentioned about it. Emergency lighting is a must. We pay lip service to it, but it is something which is going to save you. And as I had mentioned, I would give you one of the examples from the Navy. So when you switch off the light in a naval warship, it's pitch dark inside because there's no light which is coming in. It's all steel, right? And if you don't have any lights on, and you've got different equipment which are jutting here and there, and the drill that we practice is that we have smoke canisters which are thrown in a completely dark room, so that's to make it miserable for you, and you put on a smoke mask, and you have to know blindly where you're going. That means you need to know your surroundings, and that can only come by practice and if you know about it. All right, you don't have to go to such extreme measures to deal with your offices, but it is essential that emergency lighting, if it is fitted over there, will help you. Okay, and a practice, if it goes bad, if the lighting is not available, of going through dark areas is also in good order. Measures are in place for limiting fire spread, compartmentalization. Adequate measures are in place to raise alarm. Very important. One residential society that we did a fire assessment of, they had proper PA system, they had fire alarm, they had tags, they had everything over there. But the fire alarms were distributed in different areas and no one was monitoring them. Okay, so if the fire alarm went off, until a hooter or this thing did not sound in the normal area where somebody was sitting, a guard was sitting, no one would come to know what is happening over there. All right. Fire safety signs is a very important aspect which is often neglected. Like in hotels or in any way, we say that the fire safety sign should be actually at the crawling level, because smoke would generally probably rise, and you would probably be crawling and you would be on your fours. So if you have a fire safety sign over there, you would be able to discern better where you have to go, which way you have to go. Other devices like sprinklers should be properly installed, appropriate fire extinguishers in correct location, whether or not evacuation drills and fire safety training are being carried out on regular basis, who manages the building's fire safety, how well it is done, it should be checked. Proper records and documentation are being kept on fire safety measures. Correct testing procedures and maintenance are in place for fire safety systems. So these are the fire risk factors which you will consider while you're doing your assessment. Let's look at some common pitfalls. Carrying out a risk assessment in retrospect in an attempt to justify a decision that has already been made. It's called situating the appreciation in the process, but this is what generally we do. अच्छा ये हो गया, why have we done this? कि इसका एक fire assessment कर दो, इसके अंदर दिखा देने की ये इसकी जरूरत थी. Okay, you must have heard it. using a generic assessment when a site-specific assessment is needed. Fire assessment करना है, who's got the time? General कर दो, that should be sufficient. Who's going to go into the details? Carrying out risk assessment using inappropriate practices, not involving a team of people. You know, Mr. Sandeep Goel again, a treasure trove of information, I must say. When he brought out those points, you know, that you require these kind of different people. It's a team. Every individual is important. Okay, and similarly for a firefighting or a fire assessment, all individuals who are important, who have a say, the electrical engineer, the fire engineer, the person who's managing the pumps and the fire sumps, all these people require to pool in their information to actually do a proper assessment. Failure to identify all hazards, you know, if you don't have a clear understanding, you would be limited by it, and therefore you may fail to identify the hazards which may cause fire. Failure to consider all possible outcomes. Devil lies in the details. If you don't know what could be the possible outcomes, you will never prepare for them. I mean, how many companies actually in their BCP, I mean, if they had a BCP, business continuity plan, actually had pandemic taken care of or thought about? Okay, I mean, 99% or 90% of the people did not even have pandemic mentioned in their BCPs, even if they had those BCPs. Okay, and that is the reason why those companies, few companies who actually had pandemic and actually did it diligently and made that plan, were able to ensure that their businesses did not fail. Failure to consider the hierarchy of controls, very important, because everybody cannot be giving orders, and how it flows is of importance. It is a difference. The difference in hierarchy of controls and understanding can be of life and death, because if the flow of information is not in the correct manner, it can cause roadblocks and therefore problems. Failure to implement control measures, again, you know, it's a bad job for all the security guys and the fire risk marshals and the people who are responsible for these activities, because the general public does not like it, and you're always in the bad books. But you should insist upon implementing control measures so as to ensure that there is no failure in your processes to ensure that there is no fire. Not doing anything with the results of the risk assessment, example, failure to implement control measures, again, everything on paper, amazing, but implementation, zero, going to cause failures. Failing to pass on the results of the risk assessment to those covered by it, this is important. You know, this is something which I find in a number of places. I mean, a proper assessment would have been done, but then it is sitting in the desk of that particular person. He is proud of it, he's given it to some management people, and that's it. The information which is required to be disseminated to the concerned people, that is the employees, everybody, what actions to be taken, how it is to be done, what awareness building, just doesn't happen and causes problems. So after having looked at the pitfalls, let's look at what a good fire risk assessment probably should, you know, consist of. Number of criteria, I've just mentioned a few important ones. Be a suitable and sufficient assessment of the fire risk. You know, it should be a suitable and sufficient assessment of the fire risk. Include significant findings and measures to reduce and manage the risk from fire. Identify any group persons, especially at risk. Be a written record, especially, and be reviewed regularly to meet changes in the premises. Now let's look at fire hazard. Okay, let's look at the concept of fire hazard first. So when you're considering a fire risk assessment, it is useful to understand the definition of a fire hazard. Fire hazard has essentially two components which are balanced against each other. One is the possibility of fire occurring, as we have covered, and the other would be the magnitude of the consequences that fire may cause. I have elucidated by two examples. Say a metal fabrication workshop has a high possibility of fire due to the cutting and welding equipment. But providing the housekeeping is good and no combustible substances are present, then a fire is not likely to spread. So the consequence is low, therefore the risk can be considered to be normal or even low. Again, from experience, did an assessment in an area where limited amount of movement space, full of metal machinery and little bit of, you know, welding, cutting work also going on, but everything over there was metal. Okay, and the chances of the combustible material being there was very limited. So even though there was hot work and work from that going on, personal injuries, besides the point, the chances of fire taking place were low. In the case of a, say, cellular paint spray booth, an occurrence is highly likely because of the products used and the equipment required for the process. The consequences are also very high because of any fire would have a rapid development. Consequently, it would have to be considered a very high fire risk. So let's look at the fire hazards. Fire hazards are workplace hazards that either involve the presence of a flame, increase the probability that an uncontrolled fire will occur, or increase the severity of a fire should one occur. Okay, such as what are the things? Flames, sparks, hot objects, flammable chemicals, chemical accelerants, which can increase a fire's rate of spread. I think I'm 5 minutes past my thing. I hope you guys are not logged off and I'm just speaking without anybody knowing. Okay, elements of fire, oxygen, fuel, and heat. Why it is essential for us to know is that when we are identifying fire hazards, oxygen, fuel, heat, anything which can generate or lead to or cause this are the ones that you need to look into when identifying your fire hazards. Two sources of fire hazard: solids. I mean, this is such a simple table. What you could probably do is you could make such a table for yourself. Okay, and in your compartment wise or the manufacturing location wise or the office wise, you could put them under these, and yeah, as mentioned, different hazards or different substances have different kind of capabilities for causing fire, and so you would be able to address the risks associated from them with regards to fire: liquids, gases, others. I think this is the last slide if I'm not wrong. Yeah, I think I've covered
Yeah, Commander Vic, very interesting points. Some of them were really interesting, like keeping a list ready with you on the, some of the fire, the material which you think could be a possible fire hazard. And also there is another thing is that, in fact, I was thinking back of my mind when you were presenting this list, that what about those things where you are not sure that what kind of material. And when we talk about the general office scenario, there is a office and you have a lot of computers with you, you have a lot of stationery with you, you have electronic equipments and other equipment, and you do not know which of those items behaves what in a case of a fire scenario, like how a computer system will behave in a fire scenario. So you are not very much sure which are those things which will actually aggravate the situation, like some of the material which could actually blast due to fire. So those are another possibilities which will add to the complexity of the fire scenario. But your presentation actually, a concept of risk assessment is also very interesting thing. That how do you understand the risk? What are the risk? Things which.
Gaurav, you're muted. Yeah.
I'm sorry. So yeah, some of the items are very interesting for me also. I mean, and a lot of to move. So I would like to take a few questions from here, and then we can move ahead. With them. Like Mr. Kishore is asking that one of the very common fire causes the short circuit. So how do you rate this? Like short circuit aspect in terms of fire assessment.
There is no doubt about it that it is high, but short circuit, how you will rate it would be depending upon where your what kind of material has been used, what kind of location where the short circuit, even if it were to take place, whether it's going to actually lead to a fire or not. Okay, and how badly would it be, whether your alarms are in place or not. So everything, when you put together, you would come across what kind of rating you want to give, and that's the reason why we follow those steps, so that when you actually come out, so on a standalone basis, anything which is ignitable or which leads to an ignition is dangerous. I mean, it's something which will cause damage or will cause a fire, and therefore you should probably consider it to be harmful.
Yeah, thanks for that. Another question is coming from Mr. Anil Kumar. He is asking that please elaborate on the importance of stairwell pressurization and ventilation system in fire staircases.
I think best person to speak about it probably would have been Mr. Sandeep Goel.
I agree with that. So no worries. So we'll take up this question with Mr. Goel.
Yeah.
But in case you want to make any comment on this, I mean.
No, so the reason it is being done is to make a positive pressure, so as to ensure that any smoke which is coming out of it is being routed through somewhere and it is not ingressing in these places where you're using for exiting. That's basically the premise behind it.
Correct. Yeah, and I believe our defense forces is one of those best institutions which actually teaches you how to react to some of the incidences. You chose some of the very interesting cases from the Navy and other cases where you actually have to you are trained for those situations, and in the same way we have to train ourselves for any situation due to fire. Not maybe with that severity and all those things, but yes, we all need that kind of a training to react to those situations in our daily lives. So that is one point which I took from your sharing of the best practices used in the defense forces. So just to conclude today's session, I would like to thank you, Commander Vic, for the excellent presentation and for responding to just a couple of questions which we had right here. So tomorrow, I just would like to brief all the participants about tomorrow's schedule before logging off. So tomorrow we have, thank you very much. Tomorrow we have the best practices session, which is going to be very, very interesting because we have three sectors. One is the hospitality sector, which is the hotels. Second is the hospitals, and we have seen a lot of fire incidences in past in some of the hospitals. And third one is from the critical infrastructure, which is oil and gas sector. So we will see how these sectors are actually preparing themselves. What are the practices they are following to make themselves fire resistant and fire ready. So after the sharing best practices session, we will have a session for all of you to educate you, to train you on how to react to fire incidents at workplaces. This is about how should you react, and it is a kind of it will be kind of a general fire drill. Whenever you face a fire situation at your workplace, and we'll take a common example of a normal corporate office workplace, and we'll try to cover some of the angles of different kind of fires. So that will be another interesting session tomorrow. And towards the end of the training program, there will be a formal closing session. So that is for tomorrow. We request you all to join us at 2 o'clock tomorrow. And thank you for today. Have a nice day. Thank you. Sanjeev, anything to share?
No, nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Inconvenience, a little bit of inconvenience due to some technical issue, which was beyond our control. So we request all the participants to bear with us and do join tomorrow at the same time. And
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gaurav, and thank you, Mr. Sanjeev. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Karthikeyan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Karthikeyan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sanjeev. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Fatima.